I bonds, the inflation bond that's paying nearly 10% guaranteed, has a limit on how much you can invest in it. How can you get around that limit? I've got 3 ways you should consider that and more coming up. My name's Mike Bernard. I'm the host of the Wise Money Show. I'm also one of the certified financial planners right here at Korhorn Financial Group. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and smash that thumbs up button. All right, so inflation bonds or I bonds. It's a special savings bond issued by the Treasury, treasurydirect.com, that pays an interest rate that's connected with inflation, okay? It actually, if you break it down and nerd out on it for a second, it's got 2 interest rate components. One is a fixed amount that doesn't change. That's 0, by the way. And then the other one, right now, it's a rate that can change. It's a 6-month rate. It changes every 6 months, and it's tied to inflation. Right now, that means on an annualized basis, these I bonds guaranteed, issued by the government, 9.62%. That's right, 9.62%. Now, they change their interest rate every 6 months, and it's due to change November 1st. So right now, if you're thinking, wait a second, I hadn't heard about this, or yeah, actually this makes sense, you can invest, you can deposit some money into these I bonds and get this 9.62% for 6 months. But then after that 6 months, as long as you do this and get this done before the end of October, you'll get that 9.62% for 6 months, and then it will switch to whatever the new rate is. And we'll find out what that new rate is this October, and that will be the new rate, the new 6-month rate starting November 1st. So a little confusing. I've done some videos about I bonds, and yeah, complexity and confusion is one of the drawbacks, but it's got some significant benefits, okay, not side effects, significant benefits. That inflation adjusted return is one of them. One of the other drawbacks, though, is that there's a limit on how much you can invest in these things. When I first heard about them as inflation started coming up, because, you know, I was aware of them, but it really didn't, the complexity wasn't anywhere close to the benefit. And so when inflation was, you know, modest at 2%, so no big deal. But as inflation started going and you started seeing this interest rate go up above 6%, 7%, now 9%, you thought, I'm going to take all of my bond investments and move them into these I bonds. But you can't do that. There's a limit of $10,000 per calendar year that you can put in these I bonds. So a lot of people said, well, even for $10, inviting all this complexity into my financial life, not worth it. How can you get around that $10,000 limit? Well, there's some creative ways, not going to apply to everyone, but let's talk about 3 of them. First is this 10,000 limit is per person, okay? So if you're married, now this isn't a reason to get married, but if you're married, you can get $10,000. You can invest $10,000 into these I bonds, and your spouse can invest $10,000 into an I bond. Okay, so if you're married, then that's $20,000 for your household that can be invested into I bonds. That also underscores another limitation, that is, beneficiaries, that sort of stuff, or unable to hold them jointly. But in this context, that means you can invest $10,000 and your spouse can invest $10,000. What about kids? Kids can put $10,000 in as well. So if you're kind of governing and stewarding, assets for your overall family, there's a way that you can get, more than the $10,000 just by adding an account for your spouse or adding an account for your kid. So that's one way around that $10,000 limit. The second, and this one is wildly confusing, but the $10,000 that you could buy, you could invest per year is electronic, going to treasurydirect.com. Well, you could actually get paper I bonds as well. And what do you just request those? Yeah, on your tax return, you can invest in up to $5,000 of paper I bonds using refunds on your tax return. Again, I told you the biggest drawback with these is that they're complicated. Of course they would be if this is one of the features. So yes, you can elect when you're filling out your tax return to use up to $5,000 of tax refunds to buy paper I bonds. Now, you need to fill out this form, Form 88 88 and actually specify that you'd like to purchase these I bonds using refunds. Of course, you'd need to structure your taxes in such a way so you'd have that $5,000. But then you would get a paper copy of these I bonds. It doesn't make sense. Again, it adds a lot of complexity if you then have online I bonds and you've got paper ones. You can take your paper ones and log into treasurydirect.com and actually convert them into online ones, but you're unable to buy a full $15,000 of just online. You'd have to do $10,000 and $5,000 via your tax return. But that's another way to get around this $10,000 limit. And then finally, another way to get around this $10,000 limit for I bonds is, do you have a living trust? Or do you have a business? Are you self-employed? Living trusts have their own separate $10,000 limit. Your small business has its own separate $10,000 limit as well. So think about this. If you are married and you have a living trust or let's say own a small business, that's up to $40,000 that you can put into I bonds. And if you are, want to buy paper I bonds through your tax returns, that's another $5,000 you can add to it each and every calendar year. And I would say that's a bonus. That's a fourth way to consider how can you get around these $10,000 limit rules is that's per calendar year. That's per calendar year. So the way I read that is that means you can invest $10,000 right now, and here in a couple months when the calendar turns over to 2023, you can put another $10,000 in. So if you're looking at that scenario, that's up to $45,000 right now, and then another $45,000 you can put in the next, in 3 months or so. So there are some creative ways to get around the $10,000 limit on I bonds. Is it worth it? Well, that's what you've got to talk about with your certified financial planner. They invite a lot of complexity in your financial life, and at some point, inflation should smooth back out and normalize back to the previously experienced low levels. And when that's the case, these I bonds may not be as attractive compared to the complexity that they create. The minimum hold for these I bonds is 12 months, but if you withdraw them, if you cancel and close out the account and withdraw money within 5 years, you've got to pay back 3 months of interest. So again, complex. There's a little bit of hold here to it, but work with your certified financial planner. See if this makes sense. And if it does, these are some creative ways that you can explore how you can add more than just $10,000 to these I bonds. Work with your CFP. If you don't have a CFP on your team, contact one on my team. Find us online, Korhorn.com. That's Korhorn with a K, wisemoneyshow.com. You can find us there as well, or send us an email, info@korhorn.com. All right, there you have it. Go out and take your next wise step in your financial life.